Tell you what, you know what it is? It is the first Friday of the year. Welcome to 2024. This is the About Mansfield Consumer Advice Series. I'm Steve Casillo, and you are either listening to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform, you are watching this video on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, whatever it is. Thank you for being here today. And as we do every Friday, here he is right over there, Phillip Washington Jr. First of all, before we get into our topic, did you have a good New Year?
I had a great New Year. It was super fun.
Okay. The highlight of your New Year in 10 words or less.
Spending it with my family.
That's cool. That's cool. We barely got to spend time with our family. My son flew in from Denver for New Year's Eve, not knowing ahead of time that he was flying in. We booked.
Y'all shocked him with it. Y'all surprised him with it.
Well, no, we knew he was coming, but it was, oh, you're here. We're glad to see you. We're going out of town. And can you watch the dogs?
Oh man,
Daniel, thank you for watching the dogs while Mom and I went out and partied in New Braunfels.
Right, that's funny.
So today's topic, I don't even know what the topic title is, but I would assume it's called Looking into the Future.
Yeah, or maybe let's say pricing your purchasing power in homes.
Pricing your purchasing power in homes. I love the alliteration in that, purchasing power. And you came up with a graph which looks pretty daunting.
It's pretty nerdy, right?
But it at least told me that, all right, let's start with a base price and look into our crystal ball with a variety of investments.
Yeah. So
go ahead and explain that.
So when you're it's a I love Bible verses, right? A rich man builds his house on a rock. A poor man builds his house on sand.
Yeah.
So financially, you have to build your asset allocation or how you allocate money based on some foundational assumption of purchasing power, right? Because investing is saying, I want to send my money to the future and I want to be able to buy at least what I can buy today or more, right? And so most people use the assumptions of purchasing power as like government data. Government says inflation is whatever, and they project that out. Well, past performance doesn't equal future performance, so you really can't use that. You have to calculate what you think it's going to be based on like your analysis, and then you just got to be leery of everybody's going to give numbers based on their own self-interest, right? Rightfully so, right? If you ask me how good of a basketball player I am, I'm going to tell you like I can beat everybody, right? Because it's my perspective.
That's confidence.
That's confidence, right? And so I'm saying it to say you can't just use the government inflation rate from my perspective to project out what you think purchasing power is going to be, because their numbers also only considering consumer goods, right? It's not considering asset inflation, right? Which asset inflation is what we're really living through, specifically asset inflation, because and home's been a big component. So the reason why I use the average price of a home is if you can go to any time period across any country, no matter what they're doing with the currency, and you could say, all right, what's the average home price in that area? And then if you convert net worths to average home prices, you get a better example of like regular purchasing power and regular or relative purchasing power and relative wealth. And so I just did that calculation today and priced, all right, what's the average home price I think going to grow over the next decade? And I use that as my baseline for like how I'm going to outlay money in investing.
So let's start with the baseline of 2023, the average U.S. home price, and how that will compare 10 years from now to 2032.
So I have the average U.S. home price now. It's about $513,000, right? And I expect that to grow at 11% a year for the next decade or so. So the average home price will be about $1.5 million in a decade from now. And people go, well, that sounds like a lot. But I'm like, well, but like $513,000, the average home, right, in the 70s used to cost what? I mean, what was the average home price when you first bought your very first
When I
home?
bought my first home in 1987 was $99,000.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's
And-
and so the level of money printing is getting more pronounced like every year to save an indebted system. So like that's super reasonable over the next decade.
And I got to tell you, in 1987, 99,000
was a lot of money, right?
was a lot of
It
money.
was a lot of
Well,
money.
because I was in my 20s, I was making probably $10 an hour in my job, and
But that was comfortable, right? $10 an hour went further back then, didn't
oh
it?
yeah, and so I remember when the guy who was my best man in my wedding, he moved to Northern California, and it was the first time I had ever heard anyone buy a home for over $250,000. And I called him up and I said, by the way, congratulations. By the way, your home is $250,000. And he's like, in that same realm of, oh my gosh, this is horribly expensive and I'm not even sure I can afford it. But
Yeah.
and I don't even know what the home is worth now. It's probably $2 million.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Crazy, right? But same thing with this. And so when you're investing, and I did this because I have clients that are saying, "Hey, Phillip, my savings account's paying 5%, right? Or bonds are paying 4%."
5% is huge.
5% is a lot of money. I was like, okay, well let's assume you went and bought a 10-year bond, right? You gave the government your money. You gave them $513,000, and they paid you 4% a year for the next decade, right? You'll have $744,000, right? But what is the average price of a home in 10 years based on this thing? Well, $1.5 million. So you can buy your purchasing power got chopped in half, right? You have more money,
Right.
you have more dollars in your account, but the dollars don't matter. Like what matters is like what it can purchase. So that's why you want to do the conversion. So it seems wise to and it seems like it's not a risk to invest in savings account. But I was like, no, like risk is losing purchasing power, period. That's the risk. Like risk is, do you keep pace with the purchasing power? If you don't, that's risky. So bonds and savings accounts are like one of the most risky things you can invest in from this point over the long term from my perspective, based on the math, right?
So if I recall, the average rate of inflation, isn't that around 7%? Is that correct?
For this year?
Just for this year.
Yeah, it was somewhere around that for this. I don't know the number because I, on purpose, don't really look at those numbers.
Okay, because I know that you're also about not only keeping up with, but
You got to at least beat it.
beating inflation.
Yeah, because
I mean, you can have your salary, and it's increased by 2% each year, which means your salary is actually going down because you're not keeping up with inflation.
And that's why so many people are stressed out and worried because they're going, "Oh, I need to get paid more." And I'm like, yeah, like you're blaming politicians, but it's not any one politician's fault, right? It's the system's way to indebt it, right? It's innovation is bringing down the cost of everything. It's changing everything. If you were in a job that now is going to get replaced by AI, and you haven't skilled up, right? That's going to be less purchasing power. It's going to be a slowed down growth, right? That brings down rates, that lets people borrow money to go buy more real estate or invest in things in the future. And so, like, if you're on the wrong side of that change, then you lose purchasing power, right? So so from a basic standpoint, make sure your income keeps pace at 11% a year, core, foundationally, right?
I digress. We went off in the weeds. I apologize.
But that was important. No, that was important. Yeah.
But I know you were a man of loving the new technology, including digital currency. And how does that play out with purchasing power?
Yeah. So I also I said Bitcoin. Let's look at Bitcoin. If you invested $513,000 in Bitcoin, and I used a conservative estimation of what I expect Bitcoin to grow by 39% a year for the next decade, that 513,000 at that rate grows to 13 million, right? Basically,
in a decade.
In a decade,
Wow.
Which means like you can buy 9 homes, right? So your relative purchasing power got 9 times better. And so it's an example of people say, well, that's risky. I'm like, nah, like what's risky is purchasing power. Like to me, what's risky is like not understanding where the future is going, right? And then not positioning according to it. And again, what I'm not saying put all your money in Bitcoin, but I'm saying you need to look for investment opportunities that are that you understand that are priced to give you a return that's better than purchasing power, so that way you grow your money to where you can buy more homes in a decade relative to the currency that your money is priced in.
A diversified account.
A diversified account of bets that are overall doing better than 11% a year.
And calculated. I mean,
calculated.
These are calculated risks.
Yeah. Because if you just go buy a bunch of Dogecoin and you don't know what you're doing, right? It's priced maybe to do better, but will it, right? So that's where you got you like as an investor, you're more like an underwriter. You're like an insurance actuary, right? You're going big returns, high probability, right? I'm taking it and I'm buying it, taking advantage of the market's emotions around looking at everything as risky. Not everything is risky, right? I'm going to underwrite wise risk, and then I'm going to deal with the volatility so I get to the other side and I collect the premiums along the way. Right.
If someone wanted to reach out to Phillip Washington Jr. to talk about purchasing power or probabilities or returns or risk,
any of that nerd stuff.
Yeah. How can they reach out to you?
Best way is stonehillwealthmanagement.com, or you can go read my newsletter, wealthbuildingmadesimple.us, the paid newsletter, to get this detailed, good analysis. Check it out.
That is Phillip Washington Jr. That is a 10-minute nugget of information. We do this every Friday. Phillip, have a great weekend. Let's do it again next week.
Thanks, Steve. You too.